Hello, everyone. James is here. Welcome to Easy English Talk Podcast. This is your favorite English learning podcast, and I'm here with my friend Emily.
Hi, everyone.
So, Emily, we are talking about visa interviews today, and they can be a little scary, especially when you're trying to do it in English.
I can imagine. But think of it this way. The interview is the chance for you to show who you are beyond just the paperwork. It's like adding your personality to your application.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So instead of getting overwhelmed, let's focus on how to make a good impression and communicate effectively. What are some things our listeners should keep in mind as they prepare?
Well, one of the most important things is to understand the purpose of the interview from the visa officer's perspective. They want to confirm that you meet the requirements for the visa and that you genuinely intend to return to your home country after your trip.
That makes sense. So it's not just about answering questions correctly, it's about presenting yourself as a credible and trustworthy applicant.
Exactly. They are looking for clear, honest answers that reflect your situation. Let's say they ask, why are you traveling to country name? What are some ways you can approach this question that show you've thought it through?
I think it's important to be specific and avoid vague answers. Instead of just saying, for tourism, maybe talk about the places you want to visit or the experiences you hope to have.
Yes. Adding those details helps paint a picture for the officer, and it shows you've actually planned your trip.
Right. It demonstrates that you're serious about your visit. Now, another common question is about who will be sponsoring your trip. This can be tricky, especially for those who might not be familiar with the financial side of things. How can our listeners confidently address this question?
It's all about being transparent. Let's say your parents are covering your expenses. You could say, my parents will be supporting me financially during my studies. You can also mention things like having a scholarship or personal savings if those apply. The key is to be prepared to explain where your funds are coming from.
That's a really good point. Now, Emily, we know that speaking in a second language can be challenging, especially in a formal setting like an interview. Are there any phrases that our listeners can practice to help them feel more confident and fluent?
Absolutely. There are a few key phrases that can help smooth out the conversation. For example, if you need the officer to clarify something, you can politely say, I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? Or, could you please explain that again?
Those are really helpful. What about when you want to present a document to support your application? What's a natural way to do that in English?
You can keep it simple and say something like, here is my acceptance letter from the university. Or, I've brought my bank statements as proof of financial support. This shows you're organized and prepared.
Great, and I imagine being prepared with those documents is crucial for the interview. It shows you're taking it seriously, right?
Absolutely. It's like showing up for an exam with all your pens and pencils sharpened. It demonstrates a level of readiness and respect for the process.
So besides having their documents in order, what are some other things that our listeners can do to project confidence during the interview, even if they're feeling nervous?
Body language plays a big role here. Even if you're feeling butterflies in your stomach, try to sit up straight, make eye contact with the officer, and offer a genuine smile.
It's about showing that you're engaged and approachable, right?
Exactly. It's like saying, I'm happy to be here and I'm ready to answer your questions.
And speaking of questions, Emily, I'd love to dive a bit deeper into some of the more challenging ones that might come up during a visa interview.
Of course. One question that often throws people off is, do you plan to return to your home country?
Yeah, that one can feel a bit intimidating. What's the best way to tackle it?
I think it's helpful to remember what the officer is really asking. They want to make sure you're not planning to overstay your visa and that you have strong ties to your home country that will bring you back.
So how can you showcase those ties in a way that's convincing?
Think about what truly connects you to your country. Maybe it's your family or a job waiting for you or even property you own. You can say, for example, I have a loving family waiting for her back home, or I'm excited to return to my position at company name after my studies.
Those are great examples. But what if you're a student and haven't started your career yet? What ties can you highlight in that situation?
Even if you're a student, you still have strong ties. You can mention your enrollment in a university back home, your plans to graduate, or even your desire to contribute to your community after your studies abroad.
That makes sense. It's about showing that your life is rooted in your home country.
Exactly. And remember, honesty is key. The officer can often sense when someone isn't being truthful.
I think that's such an important point, Emily. It's better to be upfront about your situation and answer questions truthfully than to try to hide something or fabricate a story.
I absolutely agree. Authenticity goes a long way in making a good impression.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that I know a lot of our listeners struggle with, Nerves. Interviews can be nerve-wracking, especially in a second language. Do you have any tips for managing those pre-interview jitters?
Feeling nervous is completely normal. It shows you care, but there are definitely ways to manage those nerves so they don't get the best of you.
What are some strategies that you recommend?
Preparation is key. The more you practice your answers to common interview questions, the more confident you'll feel going in.
So it's like anything else, practice makes perfect.
Or at least, practice makes more comfortable. You can also try relaxation techniques like deep breathing or visualization to calm your nerves before the interview.
Those are great tips, Emily. I think it's also important to remember that the visa officer is human too. They understand that people get nervous in these situations.
Absolutely. They're not trying to intimidate you or catch you out. They simply want to have a conversation and gather information to make a decision.
That's a good perspective to keep in mind. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on a point we made earlier about the visa interview being a chance to show your personality. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that, Emily?
Of course. While it's important to be professional and answer questions directly, don't be afraid to let your personality shine through.
So it's okay to be yourself and show some enthusiasm.
Absolutely. A genuine smile, a positive attitude, and a little bit of your personality can go a long way in making a good impression. Remember, you're not just a name on a form. You're a real person with dreams and aspirations. Let that come through.
I love that advice, Emily. It's so important to remember that human connection in the midst of what can feel like a very formal process.
Exactly. And honestly, a little bit of warmth and personality can help break the ice and create a more comfortable atmosphere for everyone involved.
Well, I think we've covered so much valuable information today, Emily. What are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember as they prepare for their visa interviews?
I would say the most important things are to be prepared, be honest, be yourself, and practice your English.
Those are great points to remember. And don't forget, the visa officer wants you to succeed.
They do. They want to see that you're a genuine visitor with legitimate reasons for traveling to their country.
That's so true. I think we've given our listeners a fantastic toolkit to approach their visa interviews with confidence. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap things up, Emily?
Just this. Remember, you've got this. With careful preparation and a positive mindset, you can absolutely ace that interview. And even if the outcome isn't what you hoped for, the experience itself is valuable.
I love that perspective. It's a learning opportunity no matter what.
Exactly. It helps you grow your confidence in using English in a real-world situation. And who knows, maybe you'll even impress yourself with how well you handle it.
I think our listeners will be surprised by how much they've already learned from our conversation today. But before we say goodbye, let's leave them with a little challenge.
Ooh, I like challenges. What do you have in mind?
Think about all the tips and strategies we've discussed today. What's one thing you can do right now to start preparing for your visa interview? Maybe it's writing out a practice answer to the "why are you traveling" question, or gathering those important documents. Even a small step can make a big difference.
That's a great challenge. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Reach out to friends, family, or teachers for support.
Absolutely. Having a support system can make the whole process less stressful and more enjoyable.
It's like having a cheerleading squad rooting for you every step of the way.
Well, Emily, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into visa interviews. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our listeners.
It was my pleasure, James. I always enjoy our conversations.
Me too. And to all of our listeners out there who are prepping for a visa interview, we're sending you good vibes and lots of confidence. Remember those tips, practice those phrases, and go in there ready to shine. We're rooting for you.
You've got this. And hey, if you have any questions or want to share your experiences, feel free to leave us a comment. We love hearing from our listeners.
Absolutely. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode on acing your visa interview in English. We hope you found it helpful and that you feel more confident about the process now.
We sure do.
And if you have any questions or tips to share, feel free to leave a comment below.
We love hearing from you.
Don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your friends. Bye, and see you next time. Bye-bye.